We've got Jon Charters-Reid here in the studio, a very interesting chap indeed. Now, Jon, just tell everyone, you've got a few accreditations to your name, which is a bit more unusual than most surveyors out there, I think it's fair to be said.
Yeah, definitely. I began my career as a classically trained York Minster joiner, went on to become a chartered surveyor, a chartered builder, and I'm also a chartered building engineer.
Crikey. You've got a lot going on there, and I think what's quite interesting is because you've got the building background, I think there was quite a famous story involving that as well.
There was. We've had a few incidences where properties have suffered from structural movement. No one didn't know what to do or fix them, so we took our own digger, underpinned it, and we guaranteed it ourselves.
That's what you call an in-house one-stop surveyor shop. I don't know many surveyors that will go and survey a property and then go and fix it and guarantee it themselves. Quite impressive stuff. I just wanted to sort of talk through the different types of survey. I think there are a lot of home buyers out there and indeed home sellers that get themselves into a bit of a spin as to what level they require and what the actual differences are. Just talk everyone through that. Okay,
well, before we do it, let's just look at the reason why you have a survey. And at the moment it's all the wrong way around, because there's a basic valuation which tells you what the property is worth, and in essence it's a bank valuation usually, and you're lucky if it's one sheet of paper. You don't normally get to see it as the property purchaser. Now it's slightly incorrect, because how do you know what the property is worth if you don't know its condition? And for that reason, Alex, that's why you should have a survey first before you get the valuation. You know, I looked around a 1649 property a few weeks ago, and it had horrendous defects, and it does have an effect on value. Needless to say, the cost of repairs is not a straightforward deduction off the market appraisal.
No, indeed. And I mean, what are the survey types? Just
so what we have is your basic survey is the industry standard, is the RICS Home Buyers Report. It's quite a restrictive report because it has traffic lights in it, and we often do 4 or 5 surveys a week where someone's had the RICS Home Buyers Report. It's not clear, it's not easy to understand, and we've been asked to do a subsequent report to it just to highlight effectively what the deficiencies are in there.
And is it often where banks, I suppose, offer that? Because sometimes they do this overall package saying, well, we'll give you a survey, and I guess very often, because it's the lower grade one,
exactly,
it's slightly cheaper for them.
So the banks have been rather naughty, because one of the things I've said in my book, which, as you know, is How to Be a Smarter House Buyer, is that the banks they're not treating customers fairly. They're carrying out restrictive practices, because if you go to the bank for a mortgage and they offer you a mortgage, they must give you the opportunity to get your own independent surveyor.
What is then the next type of survey that you need to get?
Most individual private practices will offer their own version of that, which is usually full of common sense and not standard phrases. So you get your level 2 scheme, which is one above evaluation. Then you get your building survey, which is suitable for older houses. And what you must remember is that Yorkshire has got a plethora of terraced houses, most of them getting on for 120 years old, and they too are likely candidates for a building survey.
So the sort of the step 2, if you like, the next grade up, and I think some surveyors call it an infrastructure survey.
Sometimes it's got a number of names. Sometimes it's called a building survey or a main structure survey. And you need to be extremely careful, because there's a number of companies out there offering a building survey, charging a fortune, and it's 4 pages long.
How long are yours then?
40 to 50 pages long and 40 to 70,000 words, because the thing that everyone needs to understand is that your home that you are buying is ostensibly the family silver, and so why would you skimp on going for the cheapest survey on something that's worth literally thousands, and it's your future?
No, I quite agree. And again, I think there's confusion over sort of formal valuations, and sometimes I think estate agents offer these. Under what circumstances would someone say, I want a formal valuation? What are they, and in what situations?
So formal valuations usually begin with a probate valuation or a valuation for tax purposes, or a matrimonial valuation. The banks will ask for a valuation because it's part of the Banks and Building Societies Act and regulations that the bank need a valuation to know the property's value.
Yep.
And so the banks are quite canny because they'll charge customers up to £600-700 for a valuation, which literally is 1 to 2 pieces of paper, and they'll keep 60 to 70% of the fee, but they won't tell you that.
No, indeed. But can you get involved if I knew that I needed a formal valuation?
So there's no reason based on what we've previously said about the Council of Mortgage Lenders why a house buyer cannot insist on their own survey. If the bank turns around and says, oh no, you need to use our panel or approved surveyors, it's restrictive practice and it's tantamount to being illegal.
It is, because you've gone very specific. You've ruled out a lot of other sort of options, and at the end of the day, the client or the homeowner, or indeed the house purchaser, is actually losing out at the end of the day.
After all, you can choose your own solicitor, you can choose your own accountant, and you can choose your own mortgage advisor. So we need to be quite clear that the banks have got to stop behaving like this. And I've spent 5 years researching this, plus my 25 years in the business, in order to create the book which I've written.
So this is as you said, this is the next horizon. This is the next sort of scandal in the banking world potentially, because it certainly sounds as though it's heading that way.
Definitely. We've already spoke to a couple of law firms that are interested in setting up departments to actually tackle what is effectively almost like an in-house type of mortgage fraud by the banks, really.
Yeah. So it's sort of setting up a monopoly on it all.
Definitely, and it needs to stop, and hence the birth of the book, The Smarter House Buyer, because people have got more savvy to what's going on in the world.
Yeah, no, you mentioned your book, actually. I know that's just recently come out. Just talk, where is it? What's it about?
So it's called How to Be a Smarter House Buyer. It's available in Waterstones and on Amazon, paperback and Kindle, and in essence it highlights the deficiencies in the housing market, which effectively after the recession came broken. We're still using similar methods for selling and buying houses and advising people how to get a mortgage that we were doing 10-15 years ago, and it gives buyers tips on how to choose a good estate agent and try doing a bit of mystery shopping on your local agent.
Yeah, that was certainly in an article I've just written, actually. Do mystery shop them, going behind the scenes and just see how well you're treated as a prospective purchaser if you're looking to sell. I certainly agree wholeheartedly with that. Again, another phrase that's thrown up is the Rick's Red Book valuation. Now, just to be clear, this is formal valuation, and it's what you've talked through effectively, but what is it and how do you actually go about it?
Okay, so the RICS Red Book, it's in essence it's a large book. It's red and it's thick as the London Yellow Pages, and it's got a whole load of practice statements and guidelines that we have to comply with to provide a valuation. Now, interestingly enough, when the banks are instructing surveyors in this closed shop environment to carry out a valuation, a lot of companies are not complying to this valuation. So I'll give you another example.
Please.
A lot of companies will go do a bank valuation on a house and they won't look in the loft. And there is some practice statements now that says surveyors don't need to look in the loft on valuations. Now, to me, that's slightly wrong, because the loft, which is probably a third of the property, and it's often the Pandora's box, it reveals an awful lot of stuff. So if you're buying, let's take the average house price, let's say it's 289,000, you're buying a house, you're getting a valuation, you're paying a load of money for it, you're not even getting to see it, you don't know anything about it, and they've only looked at 2/3 of the house. How can that be right?
I quite agree. I suppose I always like to sort of finish up. You must have, in your many years of experience, had a few embarrassing stories for us, surely.
One of my favourite stories is going to a property as a younger surveyor and walking into the garden of the property, and shall we say the lady wasn't petite, it was a summer's day and she was in a birthday suit, and all I could do was offer her my clipboard, but it didn't serve purpose in covering an awful lot up, really.
You need to get a bit bigger clipboard, John.
Yes.
So great. How can everyone get in touch with you? As I said, you've got a lot of accreditations to your name. Where are you based, and what are all your contact details?
They can get in touch with our Leeds or Harrogate office, and if they type in Charters-Reid Surveyors into Google, we shall pop up on your screen. You can also contact us on our Harrogate number, which is 01423 259 601.
Jon, thank you so much. Fascinating insight as always. Really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks very much indeed. Take care.